Welcome to Starbound. My name is I'm Duck, and I will be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Freyren and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's episode. Captain Rixus Tel's crystalline form shimmered under the cold blue lights of the Concordia's bridge. The celebrated trading vessel had docked at 17 stations across 9 systems in the past 6 standard cycles, and never once had Rixus felt the particular anxiety that now radiated through the lattice structure. "Status report on our special accommodations," Rixus said, the words crystallizing in the sub-zero atmosphere of the command deck. Chief Engineer Velux's containment suit hovered near the environmental controls, the swirling gases inside shifting from pale green to a concerned amber. "Captain, we've done our best with the available information, but I must emphasize that the specifications seem contradictory." The gaseous entity's voice emerged from the suit's speaker system. "For instance, the human apparently requires an environment with free-floating dihydrogen monoxide."
"Water vapor,"
corrected Science Officer Liptex, the only crew member present who originated from a temperate world. "Yes, water vapor, thank you," continued Veluxa, "but also needs a temperature range that will keep the substance partially in its liquid state. It's scientifically fascinating, but creates considerable engineering challenges." Compliance Officer Zekt scuttled forward, methane clouds puffing from his respiratory vents.
"Captain, I must formally register that the human's arrival violates safety protocols 32B through 49C. The thermals requirements alone
"Are mandated by Galactic Council Directive 1138, Rixus interrupted with the crystalline equivalent of a sigh. "Which, need I remind you, supersedes standard protocol." Liptex rolled all 4 eyes.
"Stop being melodramatic, Zekt. Several species aboard operate at elevated temperatures."
none that walk freely among the general population,"
Zekt countered.
"The pyroforms remain in their dehydrated heat chambers as is proper."
Rixus raised a crystalline appendage, instantly silencing the debate. "The Concordia was commissioned specifically to foster interspecies cooperation and understanding. If that means accommodating a being with unusual thermal properties, then we shall do so. The human ambassador will arrive in exactly 6 hours. I expect all preparations to be completed by then." Zek's methane sighs were practically noxious as they dispersed through his environmental suit.
"Yes, Captain, but I will be monitoring the situation closely. Very closely indeed."
As the officers dispersed, Rixus allowed themselves a moment of private consideration. The Concordia was their pride, a marvel of engineering that accommodated over 50 different species through innovative compartmentalization and adaptive environmental zones. From the methane-rich chambers of the Gorgash to the magnetic suspension fields where the energy beings of Xylos conducted their business, the ship represented the pinnacle of cooperative technology. But humans were an unknown variable, classified as a Class 3 Deathworld species. Their formal introduction to galactic society was still recent enough that most information came through exaggerated stories and redacted military reports. This ambassador would be the first human permanently stationed aboard a multi-species vessel. Rixus recalled the briefing materials. A species evolved on a world with wildly fluctuating temperatures, toxic oxygen atmosphere, crushing gravity, and constant radiation bombardment from the sun. Somehow these conditions had produced an intelligent, tool-using species that was now making waves in galactic politics. Fascinating, certainly. Potentially destabilizing, absolutely. With a crystalline chime that signified determination, Rixus headed toward their private chamber. They had reading to do before this human arrived. 5 hours and 43 minutes later, the calm routine of the Concordia dissolved into chaos. Fire alert! Fire alert! Anomalous thermal signature detected in boarding tube C. The automated warning blared across all communication channels as emergency systems activated throughout the ship. Cold climate quarters initiated emergency cooling sequences. Heat-sensitive materials entered lockdown, and vulnerable crew members rushed to safety zones. Rixus materialized on the bridge within moments, their crystalline form glittering with stress fractures. Report. Velux's containment suit whirled with agitated gas. Captain, sensors detect a thermal anomaly moving through the boarding tube from docking bay C.
That's impossible.
Liptek stammered, frantically checking readings.
That tube connects to the Galactic Council shuttle bay. It should be secure.
The human, Rixus realized with sudden clarity. Their arrival was scheduled through docking bay C.
A human couldn't possibly generate this kind of thermal signature,
Zect protested, having appeared on the bridge in what appeared to be a triple-layered environmental suit.
This must be some kind of attack.
Magnify visual feed from the boarding tube, Rixus ordered. The main display shimmered to life, showing the interior of the transparent boarding tube. What they saw sent a collective gasp through the bridge crew. A figure walked calmly down the center of the tube, seemingly unaware of the havoc their presence was causing. The ship's thermal imaging overlaid the visual feed, painting the figure as a blazing inferno against the cool tubes of the tube's interior.
By the frozen moons,
Zect whispered.
It's made of fire.
Liptex adjusted the sensors.
No, that's just the thermal overlay. Switch to standard visual.
The image shifted, now showing what appeared to be a bipedal organism with a protective outer layer covering most of its form. It walked on 2 limbs and carried what looked like a small container. That's the human ambassador, Velux's gases swirled. Fascinating. Its thermal signature is completely uniform. I expected a concentrated heat in a core region, but it appears hot throughout. Captain, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the anomaly. From the boarding tube. Put it through, Rixus ordered, bracing themselves. A voice, surprisingly melodious and calm, filled the bridge. Hello, Concordia. This is Ambassador Petra Novak of Earth. I've arrived from my appointment and am requesting entry. Your boarding tube is quite lovely, but I prefer not to spend my entire assignment in it. The bridge fell silent. The voice sounded so normal. Not at all like the roaring inferno their senses suggested.
Ambassador,
Rixus responded after a moment.
We were not fully prepared for your, thermal properties. Our systems detected you as a potential fire hazard.
A sound emerged from the communication system that the ship translator had difficulty processing, a sort of rhythmic exhalation that the system eventually classified as laughter. Oh, I see. I should have anticipated this. My apologies for the alarm. I assure you I am not on fire. This is simply my normal body temperature. May I come aboard? I promise not to melt anything. Rixus looked around at their crew. Velux's gases has shifted to an intrigued blue-green. Liptex looked relieved, if still confused. Only Zect appeared to be on the verge of a methane-breathing panic attack.
Captain,
Zect hissed.
The safety protocols. If that furnace comes aboard.
Permission granted, Ambassador, Ryxis interrupted, ignoring Zect's protest.
We'll meet you at the main airlock.
Petra Novak had expected her arrival to be somewhat awkward, first human on a multi-species vessel and all that, but the reception waiting at the airlock exceeded her wildest expectations. The airlock hissed open to reveal what looked like an emergency response team preparing for a reaction meltdown. Various beings stood at careful distances, many behind portable thermal shields. Environmental suits, cooling apparatus, and what appeared to be fire suppression equipment were prominently displayed. At the center of this circus stood a magnificent crystalline being that Petra recognized from her briefings as a Krillian. Captain Ryxis Tal, if she wasn't mistaken, standing a good 5 meters behind the airlock. "Hello," Petra said, stepping forward with the small potted succulent she'd brought as a traditional Earthship boarding gift. "I'm Ambassador Petra Novak. It's an honor to join the Concordia." Several beings flinched as she moved. One methane breather in a triple-layered suit actually scuttled backward, emitting distressed clouds. The Krillian captain inclined their crystalline form in what Petra recognized as a respectful greeting.
Ambassador, welcome aboard. I apologize for the cautious reception. We're still adjusting to your thermal signature.
"Of course," Petra nodded, trying to appear non-threatening. "I understand my body temperature might seem extreme to some species. I assure you it's perfectly normal for humans." A floating containment suit drifted closer, revealing a swirling mass of gas within. "Ambassador, I am Chief Engineer Veluxa. Your thermal output is remarkable. You're maintaining nearly 310 Kelvin throughout your entire form. How do you achieve such stable heat production without combustion?" Petra blinked. Metabolism? I eat food. My body converts it to energy, and some of that becomes heat. It's just basic human physiology." "Fascinating." The gases inside the suit swirled faster. "And this heat doesn't damage your internal systems?" "No more than your gaseous state damages yours, I imagine," Petra replied with a smile. Zect, the methane breather, pushed forward next.
Captain, I must insist the human be quarantined until proper thermal containment measures can be implemented. The risk to cold climate. Crew.
"Ambassador," the captain interrupted. "This is Compliance Officer Zect. He's concerned about safety protocols."
Concerned.
Zect's methane vents puffed dramatically.
I am beyond concerned. This being operates at a temperature that could shatter you with their proximity alone, Captain.
Petra held up her hands placatingly. "I promise I'll maintain appropriate distances from temperature-sensitive crew members. The Galactic Council provided detailed guidelines."
Guidelines?
Zect practically shrieked.
We need containment, isolation, full thermal regulation.
The captain's crystalline form chimed gently, which Petra's cultural briefing indicated was their version of clearing a throat.
Zect, that will be enough. Ambassador Novak is our honored guest and will be treated as such.
Petra extended the small potted plant. "I brought this as a traditional Earth gift. It's a succulent called Haworthia. They're quite resilient and can adapt to various environments." The captain gestured to a nearby crew member who cautiously approached to take the plant, using thermal insulated gloves despite the complete lack of necessity.
A thoughtful gesture, the captain said. Now perhaps we should show you to your quarters. Our engineering team has worked diligently to create a suitable environment.
"I appreciate that," Petra said, trying not to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. "Lead the way." As they proceeded through the corridors, Petra couldn't help but notice how crew members reacted to her presence. Some pressed themselves against walls to maximize distance. Others stared with unabashed curiosity. A few checked readouts on devices that she strongly suspected were thermal sensors. "Is my temperature really that remarkable?" she asked Veluxa, who had decided to accompany the group. "For many species aboard, yes," the gaseous engineer replied. "The Methosians breathe liquid methane at negative 161 degrees Celsius. The Krillians, like Captain Rixus, form and think best at temperatures approaching absolute zero. Even our warm species typically operate below 290 Kelvin.
And then there are the pyroforms,
added another crew member, a being with an exoskeleton that Petra didn't immediately recognize. Pyroforms? Silicon-based entities who live in magma environments, Veluxa explained. They maintain dedicated chambers on Deck 12 where the ambient temperature exceeds 800 Kelvin. They're the only species aboard who might consider you cold." "I see," Petra said, mentally revising her understanding of the ship's population. "And I'm guessing they don't interact much with the general crew?" "Only through remote interfaces," the captain confirmed from a safe distance ahead. "It's prohibitive for most of us to approach their quarters." They arrive at a door marked with human standard writing as well as galactic standard symbols. The captain gestured toward it with a crystalline appendage.
"Your quarters, Ambassador. We've attempted to recreate an Earth-standard environment based on the specifications provided. If anything isn't suitable, please inform us immediately."
Petra nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Captain. I'm sure it will be—" The door slid open to reveal what could only be described as a walk-in freezer, frost-coated every surface. A thin layer of ice had formed on what appeared to be furniture. A control panel on the wall displayed the current temperature, negative 50 degrees Celsius. "Fine," Petra finished weakly. Veluxa's gases swelled in what Petra was beginning to recognize as embarrassment. There appears to have been a conversation error. Zect pushed forward.
"Nonsense. The specifications clearly stated the human should be kept cool to prevent overheating and potential combustion."
"I don't combust," Petra said dryly. "And while I appreciate the thought, this environment would kill me in minutes."
Kill?
Zek's methane clouds puffed in alarm.
But the research...
"I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Petra said firmly. "Humans operate at approximately 37 degrees Celsius internally, but we're comfortable in environments between 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. That's 293 to 298 Kelvin. The captain's crystalline form vibrated in what might have been dismay.
"I apologize profoundly, Ambassador. It seems we've made a significant error."
"It's an understandable confusion," Petra assured them. "Many species would need cooling to prevent overheating, just not too much."
"We shall correct this immediately," the captain promised. "In the meantime, perhaps a tour of the ship would be appropriate."
Petra nodded gratefully, happy to postpone entering what would have been her refrigerated tomb. "I'd like that very much." And so began Ambassador Petra Novak's first day aboard the Concordia, trailing a wake of thermal sensors, safety concerns, and increasingly bizarre rumors. By the third day of Petra's residence aboard the Concordia, the situation had evolved from mildly awkward to genuinely absurd. The methane-breathing Methosians had declared her arrival a ship-wide emergency. They barricaded themselves in their quarters, announcing via ship-wide communication that they would only emerge once the walking inferno was properly contained. Their representative sent a formal petition requesting that Petra wear what amounted to a refrigerated environmental suit at all times. The petition included diagrams of the proposed suit, which Petra found hilarious but diplomatically described as logistically challenging. Meanwhile, the scientific community aboard the Concordia had developed an intense fascination with human biology. Petra couldn't walk through a corridor without being approached by researchers with sensors, questions, and requests for small tissue samples. "No, I cannot give you a liver biopsy," she explained to an enthusiastic xenobiologist for the third time that day. "Humans need all their organs."
"But your regenerative capabilities
"Are limited," Petra finished firmly. "No biopsies." The most surprising reaction came from the pyroforms. A delegation had requested a meeting which required Petra to don a specialized cooling suit to enter their 800 Kelvin environment. She'd expected scientific curiosity similar to the other species, but instead found disappointment.
"We had such hopes,"
lamented Ignis, a flowing silicon-based entity whose body resembled living magma.
"The rumors said humans were creatures of fire, walking furnaces among the ice dwellers."
"Well, I am considerably warmer than most species aboard," Petra offered.
"Warmer, yes,
Ignis's magma form rippled dejectedly.
but still so cold. We thought we'd finally found someone to go bathing in the lava springs with."
Petra couldn't help but laugh. "I'm sorry to disappoint you. If it helps, my husband considers me quite hot by human standards." This led to an unexpected cultural exchange about attractiveness standards across species, which somehow resulted in Petra agreeing to judge a pyroform aesthetic competition the following week. She left their quarters with a diplomatic victory and a slightly singed cooling suit. Returning to her now properly temperature-regulated quarters, Petra found Veluxa waiting outside her door, the engineer's gaseous form swirling with what she learned to recognize as excitement. "Ambassador, I've been analyzing your thermal signature and have a theory about human evolution I'd like to discuss." Petra smiled. Despite the chaos, she developed a genuine appreciation for the enthusiastic engineer. "Come in, Veluxa, but fair warning, I'm no anthropologist." "That's quite all right." Veluxa's containment suit followed her inside. Most species aren't experts on their own evolutionary history. As the door closed behind them, Petra noticed a small package on her desk. "What's this?" "Ah!" Veluxa's gases shifted to a more formal pattern. "Compliance Officer Zect insisted I deliver his latest proposal for your thermal containment situation." Petra opened the package to find diagrams for what appeared to be a full-body refrigeration unit disguised as formal attire. The cooling elements were particularly concentrated around what the diagram labeled as primary heat generation organs. "This is ridiculous," Petra sighed, setting the diagrams aside. "I'm not a walking fire hazard." "To be fair," Veluxa ventured, "your thermal signature does trigger emergency systems in certain sections of the ship. We've had to recalibrate sensors along your common routes." "I understand the technical challenges," Petra conceded, "but Zek treats me like I'm going to spontaneously combust and take the ship with me." "Zek treats everything that way." Veluxa's gases formed what Petra had come to recognize as the equivalent of a shrug. Last cycle he submitted 17 violation reports because the cafeteria served Aldebaranian spiced herbs without proper hazard labeling. Petra laughed, then grew more serious. "How's Captain Rixus handling all this? I feel bad that they have to maintain such distance during our meetings." "The captain is quite pleased with your diplomatic progress, actually. Your meeting with the pyroforms was unexpected. They rarely engage with non-silicon-based life forms. They're surprisingly personable once you get past the whole living magma thing." Their conversation was interrupted by a ship-wide alert. The lights dimmed momentarily as the automated system announced, "Environmental anomaly detected in Sector 7G. Engineering personnel, report to affected area." Veluxa's gases immediately shifted to a concerned yellow-orange. That's unusual. Sector 7G houses our primary atmospheric processing for oxygen-breathing species. "Is it serious?" Petra asked. "Probably a minor fluctuation, but I should investigate." Veluxa moved toward the door. "We'll continue our discussion later, Ambassador." After Veluxa left, Petra decided to review some diplomatic briefs, but found herself distracted by the succulent plant she'd brought aboard. It sat on a small table near her viewport, looking slightly wilted despite the supposedly Earth-standard environment. "Even you're having trouble adapting, huh?" she murmured to the plant. Another alert sounded, this one more urgent. "Warning, critical failure detected in cryogenic regulation systems. All Krillian personnel evacuate Deck 4 immediately." Petra frowned. 2 environmental failures in quick succession seemed unlikely to be a coincidence. She activated her communication implant. "Ambassador Novak to bridge. Is everything all right?" There was a delay before response came. Not from the bridge, but from Veluxa. "Ambassador, we're experiencing some technical difficulties with environmental systems. Nothing to be concerned about." The strained quality in Veluxa's voice suggested otherwise. Before Petra could respond, a third alert blared. "Danger! Toxic gas leak detected in Central Corridor, Deck 5. Emergency containment measures activated." This was followed immediately by the sound of her door locking automatically. A gentle feminine voice announced, "Safety protocols engaged. Please remain in your quarters until the emergency is resolved." "Veluxa," Petra called through a communicator. "What's happening?" "Multiple environmental systems are failing simultaneously," the engineer replied, voice tight with stress. "We're trying to isolate the cause, but—" A loud hissing sound interrupted Veluxa, followed by alarmed shouting in the background. "Veluxa! Veluxa!" Petra called but received no response. Making a quick decision, Petra moved to her door and activated the manual override she'd been shown during her safety briefing. The door refused to open. She tried again, only to receive an automated message. "Manual override disabled. Quarantine protocols in effect." What the hell is the point of a manual override if I can't manually override it? Petra stepped back, considering her options. The growing number of alerts suggested a serious system-wide failure, potentially sabotage. She needed to reach the bridge or engineering, but how? Her eyes fell on the maintenance access panel near her bathroom. During a tour, Veluxa had mentioned that the ship design included redundant service tunnels to allow maintenance even when sections were environmentally incompatible. "Worth a try," she muttered, moving to the panel and searching for its release mechanism. Captain Reichstel's crystalline form trembled with stress as they surveyed the cascading disaster from their emergency command post. With the bridge inaccessible due to toxic gas buildup in adjacent corridors, they'd been forced to establish operations in the auxiliary control room on Deck 6. "Status report," they demanded, their normally melodious crystalline voice sharp with tension. "Life support is failing in multiple sectors," reported the operations officer. "Krillian quarters are warming rapidly, already past 260 Kelvin and rising. Mythosian habitats are experiencing pressure fluctuations. Oxygen-breathing sections show increasing levels of carbon monoxide." "Casualties?" "None reported yet, but we have multiple crew members trapped in affected areas. Emergency teams can't reach them due to environment barriers." Reichs processed this grimly. The Concordia's greatest strength, its ability to host wildly different environmental needs, had become its greatest vulnerability. The ship's compartmentalization meant that rescue teams often couldn't safely enter zones designed for incompatible biologies.
Where is Chief Engineer Veluxa?
Lost reported near atmospheric processing in Sector 7G. We lost communication approximately 8 minutes ago.
And the human ambassador?
Quarantined in her quarters as per emergency protocols. Rixus considered this.
The pattern of failure seems deliberate. This may be sabotage. By whom?
Asked the security chief, a hulking Baraxian whose armored exoskeleton provided protection against a variety of elements.
Unknown, but the methodical targeting of life support suggests something with detailed knowledge of our systems.
Rixus turned to the communications officer.
Establish contact with Ambassador Novak. If this is sabotage, she may be a target or a source.
After several attempts, the communications officer shook her head. No response from the ambassador's quarters. A new alert sounded, indicating yet another system failure. This time, the environmental controls for Deck 8, where several of the ship's most vulnerable species were housed. "Captain," the operations officer reported, "at current failure rates, we have approximately 40 minutes before life support becomes unsustainable in critical areas." Rixus's crystalline form resonated.
Initiate evacuation protocols for affected sections. All non-essential personnel to emergency shelters. Security teams to...
"Captain!" interrupted the communications officer. "Incoming transmission from inside the maintenance tunnels."
"Put it through."
The voice that emerged from the speakers was immediately recognizable. "This is Ambassador Novak. I've accessed the maintenance network and am currently on Deck 5. What's the situation?"
"Ambassador,"
Rixus responded with surprise.
"how did you exit quarantine?"
"Maintenance panel in my quarters. Look, I can tell something's seriously wrong. How can I help?" Rixus considered the offer. Under normal circumstances, having a civilian, let alone a diplomatic representative, navigating service tunnels during an emergency would be unacceptable. But these were hardly normal circumstances.
"Ambassador, our environmental systems are failing shipwide. We believe it may be sabotage. Engineering teams can't reach critical areas due to environmental hazards."
"What about the environmental control hub? This central facility Veluxa showed me during my tour."
"Inaccessible. The corridors leading to it are registering temperatures approaching 400 Kelvin due to coolant system failures."
There was a pause before Petra responded. "That's hot, but not immediately lethal for a human. At least not for short exposure." The implications of her statement registered immediately with Rixus.
"Ambassador,
I'm suggesting that I might be the only one aboard who can reach the environmental control hub. My walking inferno status finally has some advantages."
"It would be extremely dangerous," Rixus warned. "Even if you can't tolerate the temperature briefly, the toxic gas levels..."
"I passed a maintenance locker a few corridors back," Petra interrupted. "It had emergency breathing apparatus. I'll be okay, Captain. Just tell me what I need to do when I get there."
Rixus hesitated.
Sending the ambassador into danger violated every diplomatic protocol, but waiting for a traditional solution might cost lives.
"Very well, Ambassador. I'm sending you the access codes now. Once inside, you'll need to initiate the emergency reset sequence."
Petra adjusted the breathing mask over her face, double-checking the seal before proceeding toward the environmental control hub. The maintenance tunnel had grown uncomfortably warm as she approached her destination, well beyond human comfort levels, but still within her tolerance range for short periods. "I'm approaching the exit point," she reported through a communicator. "Temperature is intense."
"Ambassador,"
came Captain Rixus's voice, distorted slightly by interference.
"Are you certain?"
"I can handle it long enough," Petra interrupted, though she was less confident than she sounded. What's the distance to the control hub from my exit point?
Approximately 30 meters. The access door will require the codes I sent.
Understood. Petra took a deep breath through her breathing apparatus and released the hatch. A wave of heat hit her like a physical blow as she emerged into the corridor. The air shimmered with thermal distortion, and she could feel the intense heat penetrating her uniform immediately. Warning signals from her body screamed for retreat, but she forced herself forward. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly before her. Every step felt like moving through molten lead. Sweat evaporated instantly from her skin, leaving her with a dangerous sense of dehydration. The breathing apparatus, designed for toxic environments, but not extreme heat, grew uncomfortably hot against her face. 15 meters, she gasped into her communicator, unsure if anyone could still hear through the interference. The floor beneath her had become so hot that she could feel it through her boots. Warning lights flashed along the walls, eerily distorted by the heat haze. An automated system announced evacuations in multiple languages, though there was clearly no one left to evacuate in this section. 10 meters, she counted aloud, focusing on the distance rather than the pain. Her exposed skin felt tight and hot, and she knew she was risking severe burns. The control hub door appeared ahead, a shimmering mirage in the heat-distorted corridor. Petra stumbled in the final distance, her fingers fumbling with the access panel as she input the code Captain Rixus had provided. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, mercifully, the door slid open to reveal a marginally cooler room filled with complex equipment. Petra collapsed inside, gasping for breath as the door closed behind her. I'm in, she managed through her communicator. What now? Static answered her. The heat had likely damaged her communication device. She was on her own. Fighting through the disorientation caused by heat exposure, Petra surveyed the control hub. During her tour, Veluxa had explained the basics of the environmental systems, though she certainly hadn't expected to be operating them alone during an emergency. The main console dominated the center of the room, surrounded by monitoring stations for each section of the ship. Several displayed critical warnings confirming what she had already known about the ship-wide failures. Petra approached the main console, searching for the emergency reset function Captain Rixus had mentioned. The interference was primarily designed for Concordia's standard crew, but included adaptable elements for various physiologies. She located what appeared to be the reset sequence, but hesitated before activating it. Something about the pattern of failures seemed odd. If this was sabotage, wouldn't a simple reset potentially allow the saboteur to trigger the same failures again? Examining the system more carefully, Petra noticed anomalous power routines. Something had created a bypass that diverted control from the main systems. The environmental failures weren't random. They were being controlled remotely. Clever, she muttered, tracing the signal path through the same system. The bypass led to a maintenance terminal in a nearby section, one that, according to the ship's schematics displayed on a secondary screen, should have been evacuated due to the environmental crisis. Petra made a decision. Rather than simply resetting the systems, she needed to cut off the remote access and identify the saboteur. Working quickly, she began rerouting controls, creating her own bypass that would allow her to track the origin point while appearing to initiate the reset sequence. It was delicate work, made more difficult by her heat-stressed condition and the increasingly uncomfortable environment of the control hub itself. Finally, she had it. The terminal registered a successful trace, Maintenance Room 12C, ironically located near the pyroform quarters. The room would be experiencing elevated temperatures due to proximity, making it the perfect hiding place for someone who wanted to avoid pursuit. Petra initiated the genuine reset sequence for critical life support systems, then headed for the door. She had a saboteur to catch. Maintenance Room 12C was accessible through another series of service tunnels, these growing progressively warmer as they approached the pyroform section. By the time Petra reached her destination, she was again drenched in sweat, her body struggling against the oppressive heat. She paused outside the maintenance room, listening carefully. From inside came the faint sound of movement and what might have been muttering. Taking a steadying breath, Petra burst through the door, hoping the element of surprise would compensate for her exhausted state. Inside, hunched over a control terminal, was a being she recognized as a maintenance worker, a gelatinous entity named Threll that typically worked in the acid environment sections. Their amorphous form quivered in surprise as Petra entered.
Ambassador!
Threll's gelatinous body pulsed with what might have been alarm.
What are you doing here? This area is under evacuation orders.
Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing. Petra replied, moving carefully to block the exit, especially since you seem to be the one causing the evacuation. Threll's form rippled defensively.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm monitoring the acid reclamation systems.
From a terminal that's connected to ship-wide environmental controls? Petra gestured to the display, which clearly showed status readouts for various ship sections. I traced the sabotage signal here. Threll, the question is why? The gelatinous entity seemed to consider its options before its form hardened into a more defined shape, one that looked considerably more threatening than its usual maintenance worker appearance.
You shouldn't have interfered.
Threll's voice had lost its friendly tone.
This doesn't concern you.
Shipwide environmental sabotage that endangers everyone aboard absolutely concerns me. Petra countered. What's your goal here, Threll?
Goal?
The being's gelatinous form vibrated with what might have been laughter.
My goal is purity. The Concordia is an abomination, a mockery of natural order. Different species exist in different environments for a reason. Trying to force coexistence is against nature itself.
Petra recognized the rhetoric immediately. You're a purist. The purists were a fringe movement that had emerged in response to increasing interspecies cooperation. They believed that different environmental needs were proof that species should remain segregated, each in their natural habitat.
The Concordia must fail,
Threll continued.
When it does, the galaxy will see the futility of these integration experiments.
So you're willing to kill hundreds of innocent people to prove your point?
Sacrifices for the greater good.
Threll's form rippled dismissively.
Besides, emergency protocols will evacuate most. The ship itself is the target.
As they spoke, Petra noticed Threll subtly manipulating controls on the terminal. Warning signals flashed on the display indicating new system failures being initiated. What are you doing? Petra demanded, stepping forward.
Completing my mission.
The environmental control hub is about to experience a catastrophic coolant failure. The resulting explosion will destroy the ship's ecosystem and prove once and for all that these experiments in coexistence are doomed to failure.
Petra's eyes darted to the terminal display, which showed a countdown sequence. Less than 5 minutes remained before the coolant systems would overload. You wouldn't succeed, she said, edging closer to the terminal. I've already alerted the captain. Threll's gelatinous body surged upward.
It doesn't matter. No one can reach us in time through these compromised sections. The ship's own safety protocols ensure my success.
Petra realized with grim clarity that Threll was right. The environmental barriers that had hindered rescue teams would now prevent security from reaching them before the countdown completed. She was on her own. An idea formed. Desperate, but potentially effective, Thrall had chosen this location for its elevated temperature, assuming no one would pursue, but there was one path of escape that would be even more forbidden to most of the crew. "You've overlooked something, Thrall," Petra said, moving slowly toward a secondary exit she'd noticed on the schematics, one that led directly past the pyroform quarters.
"And what's that, human?"
"I'm hot-blooded," Petra said with a grim smile. Then she lunged for the terminal, slamming her palm against the emergency shutdown before Thrall could react. The gelatinous saboteur immediately flowed toward her, pseudopods extending to pull her away, but Petra had already sprinted for the secondary exit, triggering the door release.
"Stop!"
Thrall called, following.
"The shutdown isn't enough. There's a physical failsafe that must be disengaged at the hub."
Petra didn't slow down. She burst through the door into a corridor that felt like walking into an oven. This passage ran directly along the outer wall of the pyroform habitation zone, where temperature regulations were minimal because of proximity to the 800 degrees Kelvin environment inside. She heard Thrall enter the corridor behind her. The saboteur's amorphous body began to steam and bubble in the intense heat, but still pursued. Evidently, Thrall's commitment to their cause outweighed self-preservation. Petra ran despite the suffocating heat, each breath feeling like fire in her lungs. Her only advantage was that her solid form tolerated the temperature slightly better than Thrall's gelatinous body, which was visibly degrading with each meter.
"You can't survive this any more than I can,"
Thrall called, voice distorted as their body structure began to break down in the heat. "Wanna bet?" Petra gasped. Though she knew her bravado exceeded reality, she could feel her skin blistering, her body approaching its limits, but she needed only to stay ahead long enough to reach the environmental control hub again. The corridor seemed endless, a shimmering tunnel of heat and pain. Petra focused on putting one foot before the other, her vision narrowing as heat exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Finally, mercifully, she saw the entrance to the access tunnel that would lead back to the hub. As she reached for the handle, she felt Thrall's deteriorating form grab her ankle.
"We'll both die here,"
the saboteur gurgled, their once amorphous body now a half-melted mass. "Not today," Petra said, and kicked free. She wrenched open the tunnel entrance and dragged herself inside. The journey back through the tunnel passed in a blur of semi-consciousness. Petra crawled when she could no longer walk, the environmental control hub her only focus. When she finally emerged, the hub was already showing warning signs of the impending coolant failure. Displays flashed urgent alerts as systems approached critical levels. Petra staggered to the main console, searching desperately for the failsafe Thrall had mentioned. Her heat-stressed mind struggled to focus on the complex systems. "Ambassador," a voice crackled through the console speaker. "Ambassador Novak, respond!" "Captain," Petra croaked, barely recognizing her own voice. "The systems are still approaching critical failure. There must be a manual override." Petra's eyes frantically scanned the equipment. In her impaired state, the technical array seemed impossibly complex. Then she saw it. Not a sophisticated control, but a simple physical valve marked with warning symbols. The coolant regulation system's emergency cutoff. With the last of her strength, Petra dragged herself to the valve and gripped it with burned hands. It refused to budge at first, then slowly, agonizingly, began to turn. The final rotation took everything she had. As the valve clicked into its emergency position, the warning signal shifted from red to amber. The countdown froze, then disappeared from the screens. Petra collapsed to the floor, consciousness fading as the ship emergency medical alert automatically triggered. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was oddly serene. "At least I proved I'm not made of fire." The medical bay of the Concordia was designed to accommodate a wide variety of species, but even its extensive facilities were challenged by Petra's condition. "Third-degree burns, over 40% of her body," the chief medical officer reported to Captain Rixus, who observed from a safe distance. "Heat exhaustion, dehydration, smoke inhalation. Oh, by all rights, she shouldn't have survived." But she will recover, the captain asked, the crystalline form vibrating with concern. Yes, human resilience is remarkable. Their bodies can withstand significant trauma and still regenerate. She'll need time, but she'll heal. Veluxa hovered nearby, the gaseous form swelling with relief. The engineer had been among those rescued after Petra's actions restored environmental controls. The thermal capabilities that seemed so alarming to us possibly saved her life, and all of ours.
Indeed, Captain Rixus agreed. When she awakens, she deserves our highest commendation.
3 weeks later, a formal recognition ceremony was held in the Concordia's main assembly hall. Due to the mixed environmental needs of the attendees, the space was divided into appropriate zones, with communication facilitated through screens and translators. Petra, still showing some signs of ordeal but largely recovered thanks to advanced medical technology, stood at the center. Captain Rixus addressed the gathering from their cold environment podium.
Today we honor Ambassador Petra Novak, whose actions prevented catastrophic failure of our ship's systems and saved countless lives.
The captain's crystalline voice resonated through the hall speakers.
The saboteur Thrall has been apprehended and will face justice for their crimes against this vessel and all it represents.
A respectful chime, the Krillian equivalent of applause, rippled through the assembly, joined by various species forms of appreciation.
Ambassador, the captain continued, though protocol prevents me from presenting this in person, please accept the Concordia's highest honor, the Star of Unity.
A hovering drone delivered a crystalline medallion to Petra, who accepted it with a respectful bow. "Thank you, Captain," she responded. "But I must emphasize that I was simply in the right place at the right time, with the right body temperature." This drew appreciative laughter from the assembly. After the ceremony, Petra found herself approached by Engineer Veluxa, who carried what appeared to be a folded garment. "Ambassador, I've been working on something for you." The gaseous engineer containment suit hovered closer. "Not a thermal containment device," they added quickly, noting Petra's skeptical expression. They unfolded what proved to be a specialized environmental suit, far more sophisticated than standard models. This is designed to protect you from extreme environments you might encounter during, well, any future situations that might arise. It can withstand temperatures from near absolute zero to over 1000 Kelvin, while maintaining your optimal internal environment. Veluxa's gases swirled in what Petra had come to recognize as their version of humor. For the next time you need to run through liquid nitrogen or volcanic corridors. Petra laughed and accepted the gift. "Let's hope there isn't a next time, but thank you. This is incredibly thoughtful." Before Veluxa could respond, Compliance Officer Zect approached, looking uncharacteristically subdued. The methane breather held what appeared to be a datapad.
"Ambassador,"
Zect began formally,
"I have reassessed my position regarding your presence aboard the Concordia."
"Oh," Petra raised an eyebrow.
"Yes."
Zekt's methane vents puffed slightly.
"I have officially withdrawn my 17 safety violation report and have instead drafted a new ship protocol titled Human Thermal Advantages in Crisis Situations."
He presented the datapad with what seemed like reluctant respect. Petra accepted it graciously. "Thank you, Officer Zect. That's very progressive of you."
"Don't misunderstand," Zect added quickly. "I still believe you represent a significant thermal anomaly and should maintain appropriate distances from temperature-sensitive personnel. But I acknowledge that in certain specific scenarios, your anomalous properties may prove beneficial."
Coming from Zect, this was practically a declaration of friendship. Petra nodded solemnly, suppressing a smile. "I'll take that as high praise." As the gathering continued, Petra found a moment of quiet to visit the ship's common area, where a succulent plant had been placed on a special stand, one that kept it at a safe distance from cold climate species, but visible to all. To her surprise, it was thriving, having adapted to its unique environment. Captain Rixus approached, maintaining a proper distance, and observed the plant alongside her.
It seems your gift has the same resilience as its provider,
they remarked. Adaptation is what we do best, Petra replied. Speaking of which, I received a rather interesting communication from Galactic Council headquarters today.
Oh?
Apparently, word of our thermal incident has spread. Several other multi-species vessels are now requesting human crew members as what they call emergency heat sources and walking thermal regulators. The captain's crystalline form chimed with amusement.
Your species may have found an unexpected niche in galactic society.
It gets better, Petra continued with a laugh. The pyroforms have started a social media campaign with the tagline, "Humans are too hot," which has gone inexplicably viral across multiple species networks.
Huh. Fame comes in unexpected forms, I suppose,
Rixus observed. Petra gazed around the common area, watching members of vastly different species interacting across the environmental barriers. Despite all they'd been through, the ship's purpose, fostering understanding and cooperation, remained intact. You know, she said thoughtfully, when I was assigned to the Concordia, I was worried about finding my place here. I never expected that my body temperature of all things is what would make me special.
The universe often values what we take for granted,
Rixus responded plainly. Petra smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with her biology. They thought I was made of fire, she mused, but in truth, they were the ones who helped me shine. Above them, the stars streaked past the viewport as the Concordia continued its journey through space, a microcosm of life, adaptability, and unexpected connections in an ever-expanding universe.